Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into the really fascinating history of language teaching. We're taking a trip through time to see how the whole idea of learning a new language has been completely flipped on its head over the centuries.
So think about this for a second. Depending on when and where you went to school, your French or Spanish class could have been anything, right? Maybe you were repeating phrases in a language lab, maybe you were acting out little scenes, or maybe you were just reading really old books. So why the huge difference? Well, it's all part of this long, winding story of evolution that we're about to unpack.
All right, so our story starts way before any classroom you'd recognize. Back in ancient Greece and Rome, learning another language wasn't for everybody. Not at all. It was all about training the elite, the future leaders, the best speakers. For other cultures, it was about something else entirely, like preserving a legacy so that it wouldn't just disappear. Language was a tool for the powerful, and it was a vessel for culture itself. So how did we get from training orators to today? This timeline is basically our roadmap. We're going to start with this super academic method called grammar translation, then watch the rebellion that led to the direct method. After that, we'll see how war gave us audiolingualism, and then we'll explore the really interesting humanistic wave of the 70s, before finally landing on the method most of us know today, the communicative approach.
Okay, so in the 18th and 19th centuries, the first really formal method shows up, and it's called grammar translation. And what's wild about this is that the goal wasn't to, order a coffee in Paris. Nope. The whole point was to know the rules of a language, to be able to read its great literature, which was usually Latin, and to translate it. Language was basically treated like an intellectual puzzle, a serious workout for your brain. So what did that classroom look like? Well, you'd be spending a ton of time dissecting grammar rules, memorizing these massive lists of vocabulary, and just constantly translating sentences back and forth. Your own native language was used for everything. And actually speaking the language you were learning, that wasn't really the point at all. But then the world started changing. The Industrial Revolution started connecting people in brand new ways. And people started thinking, hey, maybe we should actually, speak these languages. This growing need for just practical, real-life conversation, it sparked a huge rebellion against those old, dusty methods. And when I say rebellion, I mean it. The shift was dramatic. The pendulum just swung completely to the other side. The goal went from reading and analyzing to actually speaking and communicating. The classroom language switched from your native tongue to only the target language. And the focus flipped from getting every single rule right to just being fluent enough to be understood. It was a total revolution. And this revolution had a name, the direct method. The core idea was, for its time, pretty radical. Absolutely no translation allowed. The mother tongue was basically forbidden once you walked in the classroom. The entire goal was to create this totally immersive environment that tried to copy how a little kid learns their first language, just by hearing it, thinking in it, and speaking it from day one.
But you know how it goes, right? That pendulum of teaching methods. Well, it was about to swing again. And this time, the big push came from a massive global event, World War II. The needs of society were about to change everything once more. See, during the war, the U.S. government needed people, especially military personnel, to learn new languages, and they needed it done like yesterday. This urgency gave birth to something called audiolingualism. It was heavily influenced by behaviorist psychology, which basically treated language learning like a science. The idea was to break your old native language habits and drill new ones into your brain through just endless repetition. So the heart of this whole thing was the drill. Often in a language lab with headphones on, it worked in this simple little loop. First, the stimulus. A teacher or a recording gives you a phrase. Second, your response. You immediately repeat it. And third, feedback. The teacher confirms you got it right, and you would do this over and over again until it became an automatic habit. Now, after all of those robotic, repetitive drills, it's probably no surprise that the next big change was a swing in the complete opposite direction. In the 1970s, this humanistic wave comes along, and it moves away from habit forming and starts focusing on the learner's feelings, their psychology, and their comfort. And this led to some really wild, fascinating methods. Take the silent way. Here, the teacher's most powerful tool was silence. Yeah, you heard that right. The teacher might use physical objects, like these little colored rods, to demonstrate a concept without saying a word. But then, they just step back. The goal was to make students rely less on the teacher and more on themselves, to become active problem solvers using the language. And if that sounds unique, get ready for Suggestopedia.
I want you to picture this. You walk into a classroom with soft lighting, maybe some classical music is playing. You might even be invited to lie down comfortably. The teacher then acts kind of like a theatrical performer, reading sentences with all this dramatic tone and expression. The belief was that in this super relaxed state, you would just learn accidentally, absorbing the language from the whole vibe of the room. And then there was community language learning. This approach saw anxiety as the biggest roadblock for learners. So here, the teacher is less of a teacher and more of a supportive counselor. A group of adults sits in a circle and they decide what they want to talk about. In their own language, the teacher then translates it for them, and those sentences, the students' own words, become the lesson. It's all about building a safe community where people aren't afraid to try. So you've got these grammar puzzles, the military drills, the silent teachers, the musical classrooms. It's a lot, right? Well, all of these different experiments, they were all leading somewhere. And in the 1980s, they all started to merge into this single big idea that pretty much dominates our classrooms today.
And the central idea that finally clicked is actually incredibly simple but so powerful. The ultimate goal of learning a language is communication. That's it. It's not about perfectly reciting grammar rules. It's not about drilling phrases without a single error. It's about being able to successfully get your message across in a real-world situation. Function over flawless form. And what's super important to get is that the communicative approach isn't one single rigid method. You should think of it more like a big umbrella. And underneath that umbrella, you've got a lot of the modern techniques you might see today. Things like task-based learning, where you have to complete a real-world task, project-based learning, and even the flipped classroom model.
So, we've gone on this incredible journey, from translating ancient Latin texts to drilling soldiers for war, all the way to today's focus on just having a real conversation. This journey shows us that how we teach is always evolving. Which, of course, brings us to a final question for you. In a world where we all have powerful AI translators right in our pockets, what's the next great shift going to be? What will be the point of learning a language, and how will we teach it? Something to think about, right? Thanks for joining me.